Title sequences often reflect the mood of the film in which they reside. They can offer foreshadowing at the plot, or they can just be a work of art, like in the James Bond films. Today we're going to be recreating the Pirates of the Caribbean title using the BorisFX Extruded Text plugin in HitFilm 4 Pro. I'm Javer Valbar for inScapeDigital.com. Let's get started. I'll start by making a new composite shot and creating a black background layer. Now, contrary to what I first thought, the extruded text effect does not go on a text layer. Instead, create a plane and under the Boris Continuum Complete folder, drag the effect onto it. Click Launch Text Window to enter the title you want to display. I'll type Pirates of the Caribbean and use this Pieces of 8 font, which you can download from the link in the description. I'm going to make the words a different font and adjust the sizes of the different letters. Once I hit apply, you can see that the text now appears. A big part of title design relies on the font. If you're using something like Arial or Times New Roman, there's not really much you can do to make it look good. Websites like dafont.com offer plenty of options for getting a professional typeface. At this point, I'm going to branch off of the text tutorial for a little bit and show you around the effect itself. If you just want to know how to create the text, skip to the timecode shown on screen now. Starting at the top, there is a help guide button available. It's pretty comprehensive, so I recommend taking a look if you have any questions. There isn't much to change in the preferences, mostly technical settings. Now, this preset option has a couple different variants, but for the most part I won't use this because it resets all of your settings down below. The render dropdown has a few more settings. You can adjust the polygon count for a smoother look, fix anti-aliasing, and enable motion blur. As of now, Boris does not integrate with HitFilm's lights and cameras. There is a planned update coming this year to do so, but for now, if you want more than one light on your text, checkmark them and the options will appear below. The extrusion style is another preset category for different looks. The extrusion window contains settings for the look of your text as well as the bevels. Extrusion depth is how thick the text is, and bevel amount controls the edge. There are 3 bevel styles to choose from. I'm going to stay with straight for this effect. Now, this material count option here is pretty important. If you want the front of your text to have a different color or texture than the bevel, side, or back, you need to choose that here. In this case, I'm going to be wanting to control 3 of them, and I'll do that later on when I start customizing the text. Front material controls the properties of only the face of the text. If you want a preset, you can load that. There are also options for different textures. Here you can control the colors. Diffuse is likely the one you'll change first. This front bump file setting will come into play later. It'll help add a rough look to it. Moving on, transformations is where you're going to do all of your movement. If you want to rotate, slide, or scale the text, this is where it happens. The path window gives you options to set the position of the letters. You can see that if I select circle, that's the shape it takes. If you have a saved path, you can also load it in here. Letter transformations gives you control over the individual letters. Here I'm just changing some of the settings, all with a different effect. These 2 dropdowns are where you control the built-in light and camera. You can choose between a point or spot for the light, and move it around, change the intensity or color. Jitter is just what it sounds like. You can see it adds some animation to each of the letters individually. And finally, if you want any of these effects listed, you have to checkmark them. The help guide contains more info on what they do. Alright, let's get to creating the effect. The first thing I'm going to do is bring the extrusion depth to 2, and the bevel down to 0.2. I'll set the material count to 3, and you'll notice that the options for the side and bevel materials appear below the front. Starting with the front material here, I'll change the diffuse to a light orange-yellow color. I'm going to make the bevel diffuse a bit darker. Nothing too noticeable, but it gives it an edge. I'll make the side color about the same for now, and change it later if needed. Okay, so it doesn't look too bad right now. It's a little bit plain, but we still have a bit to go. I'm going to make sure my built-in light is in the middle. By default, it looks like it's off to the left, so I'll just center it there. Let's add some texture by going to the front material and selecting a bump file. You can see that adds some dark spots depending on which file you use. Adjusting the bump strength changes how dark the spots are. So that added some variety in the color of the text, but it didn't really add any depth. It still looks sort of flat. I'm going to create a grade layer and drop the parallax effect onto it. It doesn't change too much until you add a light. I'll move the light in front of the text, and now it looks a lot more detailed. You can change the depth of the parallax to your liking, but also keep in mind that adjusting the bump strength also affects the way it looks. This is because HitFilm is using the light and dark portions of the text to generate the parallax. Increasing the bump strength results in darker patches, which means more depth. I ended up adjusting the bevel to 0.1 to make it more subtle. Then I added a glow effect to the grade on top with a high threshold and low intensity. The point of this wasn't to make the text look like it was glowing. It was supposed to give a few parts of it a reflective look, like it was getting hit by light. The Z position of your built-in light can make a noticeable difference in the way your text looks. I changed the one I have here to 0.2, and now it looks a lot closer to the final result. To reveal the words, I simply keyframe the Z position to move from behind them to in front. So now to add some more variety to the color and lighting, I'm going to drop a fractal noise effect directly onto the text plane. What we want is a fair amount of highlights and dark spots. I'll turn down the influence and scale, and adjust the exposure and offset. Keyframe the seed to get a constant waving movement. Then set the blend mode to overlay, and that gives you moving shadows for more depth. At this point, the main title is pretty much done. For the subtitle, duplicate your plane and move it down using the transformation window inside the effect. Launch the text window and change it to whatever you need. I'll scale it down and position it, then set the diffuse color to a silver. I adjusted some of the bevel and bump textures since it's a smaller layer and they have a greater effect on it. And that's how I created the titles for this sequence. The background consists of 2 particle simulations for the smoke and sparks, as well as a small radial gradient in the top of the frame. I hope this tutorial helped you understand the extruded text effect a bit better. But as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.